Mark and Emily had always tried to maintain what they called a balanced marriage. At least that was the idea on paper. To the outside world, they were the couple who rarely fought, went on the occasional weekend trip, and smiled for family photos like nothing was wrong. But behind closed doors, Emily had started enforcing a strict set of rules on Mark, a rulebook she claimed was necessary to keep the marriage organized and fair. At first, Mark had tried to comply. He followed the curfew on when he could come home after work, checked in constantly, and even asked permission for minor things like ordering new furniture or having friends over. Emily's friends found the whole thing hilarious. They would giggle when he texted for approval, call him obedient Mark behind his back, and mock him with playful, teasing questions during their group dinners. Mark laughed along sometimes, trying to brush it off, telling himself that compliance was easier than confrontation. But over time, the rules became suffocating. There were regulations on what he could eat, how he dressed, even how much time he could spend on his hobbies. Every minor deviation sparked a lecture that lasted for hours, always ending with Emily insisting he had to earn her trust again. Mark started noticing that Emily's friends were subtly enjoying this power play. They would exchange knowing glances, whisper under their breath, and occasionally record him being scolded, sending him a link with a laughing emoji. He felt trapped like a performer in a play he never auditioned for. One evening, Mark came home later than usual because of an unexpected client meeting. He knew the rulebook prohibited any deviation from his set schedule without prior notice, but the nature of his work didn't allow for constant updates. Emily's face hardened the moment she saw him. "You broke the rules," she said sharply, holding the book open. Her friends, who were over for their weekly wine night, stifled laughter and nudged each other, clearly entertained by the spectacle. Mark felt a pang of humiliation, but instead of raising his voice, he remained calm. He didn't argue. He didn't apologize for something he had no control over. Inside, however, something had shifted. He realized the joke wasn't on him, it was on the marriage. He had given Emily his trust, his respect, his energy, yet she treated it as a game to be manipulated. And her friends weren't just amused, they were complicit, reveling in his obedience while he sacrificed his dignity. Mark decided he would wait, observe, and look for the turning point. He would not let anger dictate his actions. He would let the consequences unfold naturally, and when they did, everyone who laughed at him would understand the cost of underestimating someone who had finally stopped playing along. The next few days were tense, yet Mark maintained an outward calm that confused Emily and silenced her friends for brief moments. He didn't break a single rule, yet he subtly started reclaiming control in ways they didn't anticipate. He would arrive home quietly, take care of household tasks without being asked, and even compliment Emily when it seemed least expected. She noticed it. How he could act like nothing had happened, how he didn't plead for permission, yet wasn't confrontational either. It frustrated her more than she expected. Her friends, who once laughed openly at his compliance, began whispering nervously to each other, unsure of how to react to this change in energy. One evening, Emily decided to enforce a particularly absurd rule about how Mark was allowed to spend his Saturday morning. "No coffee before 9 a.m., she said sternly, flipping open the rulebook with a flourish. Mark simply nodded, poured his coffee at 8:30, and went to the balcony. He didn't hide it. He didn't sneak it. He just let it happen. Emily's friends choked back laughter at first, expecting a scene, but it didn't come. The calm precision of Mark's small rebellion unsettled them. He wasn't openly defying her. He was quietly reclaiming the authority he had long surrendered. That afternoon, Mark invited a few colleagues over under the guise of a casual work meeting. Emily's friends, curious as ever, stopped by to check how obedient Mark really was. They expected tension, awkward glances, and some kind of embarrassment for him. Instead, they found Mark engaging, confident, and effortlessly in control of the space. He spoke warmly to everyone, managed the meeting smoothly, and subtly demonstrated that he didn't need Emily's permission to live his life. The laughter that once mocked him turned into uncomfortable silence. Emily's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly as she realized that the rulebook no longer had power over him. The game she had started was slipping out of her hands. Later that night, after her friends had left, Emily tried to confront him directly. "You're breaking the rules," she said, her voice trembling between anger and disbelief. Mark leaned back, calm as ever, and said simply, "I'm not breaking them. I'm just living my life within them my way." Emily opened her mouth, but no words came. She realized that he hadn't argued, he hadn't begged, yet the dynamic had completely shifted. Mark's quiet authority, his patience, and the subtle reclaiming of control had begun to turn the laughter of her friends into unease. For the first time, Emily sensed that the power she thought she had wielded was an illusion. The rules she had used to control him had not broken him. They had revealed his strength. And that strength was patient, calculating, and unstoppable when it finally decided to act. The following week brought the turning point. Emily, still clinging to the rulebook, tried to enforce her latest policy on how Mark should spend his evenings, thinking she could intimidate him into submission. But Mark had anticipated this moment. He calmly told her, "I've followed every rule you set, but I decide how to live within them. Not you." The words were simple, but the weight behind them stunned her. Her friends, who had been over earlier that day, had witnessed Mark's quiet command of his own life and now exchanged anxious glances, realizing the joke was no longer on him. Mark didn't need to yell, plead, or make a dramatic exit. He didn't need to prove anything with words. Instead, he began setting small boundaries, subtle acts that demonstrated his autonomy. He took his own weekend trips without prior approval, hosted gatherings in their home with Emily's friends present, and engaged in conversations with confidence, never disrespect, but always clear on his choices. Emily tried to counter, pointing to the rulebook, thumbing through pages of do's and don'ts, but her voice faltered each time. Mark remained steady, calm, and patient. The very tools she had used to assert dominance now only highlighted her growing insecurity. The final blow came one Saturday evening when Emily invited her friends over to celebrate a trivial victory she thought she had over him. A minor rule he had broken in her eyes. As soon as they arrived, they noticed something different. Mark greeted them warmly, confidently, and orchestrated the evening with effortless charm. Conversations flowed, laughter erupted naturally, and it became clear that he was in charge, not Emily. Her friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some whispering to each other, others shooting nervous glances at Emily. It was the first time she realized the social power she thought she had relied on, the laughter, the ridicule, had evaporated. The joke had completely backfired. By the end of the night, Emily's friends quietly left, murmuring apologies for their earlier mockery. While Emily sat in stunned silence, the rulebook closed beside her. Mark, calm and composed, finally addressed her directly. "I respected your rules, I respected your authority, but I never surrendered myself. You laughed at me, mocked me, and tried to control me. Yet here we are. I followed the letter of your rules, but not the spirit that allowed you to diminish me. That ends now." Emily finally understood. The control she thought she wielded had never been real. Mark's patience, subtle defiance, and unwavering self-respect had flipped the power entirely. The laughter that once mocked him had returned, not to humiliate, but to acknowledge that he was no longer the man to be controlled. The rulebook was useless and the lesson was undeniable. Respect cannot be demanded, it must be earned, and if you try to govern someone's life with rules and ridicule, the outcome will always be determined by the strength of the one you underestimate.